Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Matt and I do like video games, and in today's video I want to talk all about Dead Space Remake, and that's exactly what I'm going to do, so let's get right into the video. Okay guys, so we all know that remakes can be very much a hit or miss thing for video game developers. It definitely seems like Capcom knows their way around a remake, and it certainly seems that Naughty Dog knows their way around a remake with The Last of Us Part 1. And you've got a lot of Final Fantasy fans that are more than happy with Square Enix's remake of Final Fantasy VII. But this is all just stuff that's happened within only the last 5 years. Remakes are not a new concept. Remakes have been around since the 80s. It goes all the way back to Mario. I mean, remakes have been a thing forever in gaming. And then of course, on top of all that, you've always had this debate of what makes something a remake versus what makes something a remaster. That's always been up for debate. There's a lot of games that really blur that line. I think a good example of that would be 343's remake slash remaster of Halo 2 Anniversary. But to bring this all the way back to Dead Space Remake, there are no blurry lines with Dead Space Remake. This is a remake, 110%. In fact, to me, this is the best remake I've ever played, and I'm going to tell you why in this video. And this is just going to be a good old-fashioned pros and cons review of the Dead Space Remake. And there's a lot of pros, so I'm going to start with that. So upon starting Dead Space Remake for the first time, what you're going to first notice, or at least what I first noticed, is just how damn good the game looks. I mean, I played the original earlier in the summer sometime, and that was my first time ever playing it, and I thought, for a game from 2008, it aged pretty well. Looks pretty decent, it's not, 4K graphics, it's not 60 FPS, but it does look pretty decent. Well, when you boot up Dead Space Remake, it is a night and day difference. And that's just the first thing you'll notice. There's many other things you will notice immediately after this as well. So let's just say that you're lucky enough to be playing this through on a Series X or a PS5. Well, you've got two different modes to choose from when it comes to graphical options. You can choose a quality mode, which targets ray tracing at 30 FPS upscaled to 4K output, or you can play performance mode at 60 FPS upscales to 1440p output. Now, I chose to play in performance because I really do love my 60 FPS gameplay, but there's no reason you can't enjoy that 30 FPS mode as well. And there is only one graphics option on the Series S, and that is 1440p at 30 FPS. So really, overall, the game looks great and it performs great no matter where you play it, except on PC. Now, PC, you can nail down the settings a little bit. You can get yourself a really playable experience, pretty good experience, pretty smooth experience, but there's a VRAM issue on PC. Now, I'll leave some details about that in the description below, but not to go too far into it in this video. Basically, you get VRAM spikes, your performance tanks, you might be getting 90 FPS at 1 second, then all of a sudden you're down to like 30 FPS, then it shoots back up, and it's just all over the place. It's not pleasant. It needs patched on PC. But hopefully they'll patch it soon so everybody can get to enjoy this game the way that I did. Now, under my list of pros, sitting at number 2 is actually something that I wasn't sure I'd be putting under a list of pros for this game when it was announced. And that is the fact that Isaac Clarke is no longer a silent protagonist. He has lines, he speaks.
This rumor is not a job you turn down, but 6 months apart with only vid calls? It's rough. Easy to say the wrong thing.
And it's not overdone. I find that to be the most important thing, really the most important thing about the fact that they gave him lines in this game. It's not like they just gave him lines for the sake of giving him lines. Everything he says moves the story forward or adds context to the story. It's not just a bunch of filler. It's really well thought out, honestly. And along with adding dialogue and lines for Isaac Clarke, EA Motive has also added a number of side quests that you can do throughout your playthrough. Now, on my first playthrough, I didn't really do any side quests. In fact, I don't think I did a single side quest because I didn't realize till halfway through that they were there. But on my New Game Plus playthrough, I'm actually doing a few of the side quests, and they're actually pretty decent. They're a lot better than I would have expected. And much like the stuff that they've added to the actual story of the game, the main story of the game, the story in the side quest really only adds to the story. It gives context, it adds backstory. It's pretty well done. Now, listing this next thing as a pro for anything other than a Dead Space remake might be seen as completely insane. But the violence in this game is spectacular. I mean, the violence in this game really is a spectacle. And I've talked about this on a few other podcasts that I've been on, but I feel like Dead Space Remake is the game that I was hoping I would get with Callisto Protocol. And that might be unfair to Callisto Protocol, but the reason that I say that it was what I expected in Callisto Protocol is that I feel like one of the big things for Callisto Protocol's marketing was how graphic and how violent it was, and how when you shot enemies, their skin would peel off, and how everyone on the team was super disgusted by it. But when I actually got my hands on Callisto Protocol and played the game and actually beat it, I didn't notice that at all when I was killing enemies in that game. I never saw skin come off or anything like that, but they talked about it so much in their marketing, and so I was just left kind of underwhelmed by that in the game. Maybe I did do that in the game, but I just don't remember it. Maybe I just didn't notice it. I'm not entirely sure, but I really don't remember that happening. But I will say that in Dead Space Remake, it is very noticeable. From the very first time you pick up just the plasma cutter and shoot your first necromorph, they want you to feel this game. They want you to feel the impact of that weapon, and they want to show it to you visually. The weapons in this game absolutely obliterate enemies. In fact, I think my favorite weapon in the game is the force gun for that very reason. And I'll have a video of this playing right here. I'll see if I can get a video up for you. But if there's a necromorph in front of me and I whip out the force gun and I shoot that thing, the first shot, the skin is coming off of that thing like fried chicken. And that sounds, again, horrible. But in this context, it's awesome. It's a gross description, but that's really the point I'm trying to get across. It's gross, it's violent, it's disgusting, but that is everything you want in a Dead Space game. And while we're on the topic of weapons, they've definitely made some changes to the weapons. All, or I guess most of the weapons now feature an alternate fire mode. Now, I just said that my favorite weapon in the game is the force gun, and it is. But if I had to pick a close second favorite, it's gotta be the contact beam. The contact beam basically just melts enemies. Anything that's in front of you is gonna get melted. Now, this gun features an alternate fire mode that basically just lets you charge that shot up and do even more damage, and a bigger radius of damage. It's pretty damn awesome. One thing to definitely keep in mind on these alternate fire modes is that when you're using these, it will almost always use more ammo than it would if you were to just shoot it normally. And this is definitely something to keep in mind if you plan on playing through on a harder difficulty. Now, for my first playthrough, I played through on normal. I didn't really have too many issues with resource management. However, on my New Game Plus, I'm playing through on hard. Resource management can be a bit more difficult on a harder difficulty, and I find myself not being able to take advantage of the alternate fire modes nearly as much as I was able to on my first playthrough, which I kind of like because it kind of helps you get a little bit more creative with how you take down enemies. You maybe save that alternate fire mode for a group of enemies as opposed to, just blasting away an enemy with an alternate fire mode. I also want to go over something that I like that EA Motive added, and that's like these new rooms, these new locked rooms that you have to get clearance to. And there's different clearance levels in the game too. You'll get clearance level 1, level 2, level 3, and then there's like that master clearance towards the end of the game that you get. And all of those are really nice because they open up rooms that weren't in the original game that are there to just basically give you loot, help you get more resources, help you fill up on ammo, help you get some credits and stuff to buy stuff. It's really nice, and it's a really good addition to the game. Also, I want you to really quick think back to that first time that you went into zero gravity on the original Dead Space. Now, for me personally, I thought it was pretty damn cool, but as the game went on, there were more and more of those sections, and it started to get a little bit grating. And the reason was you didn't have much control in those situations. It wasn't until Dead Space 2 and 3 where we actually got full control of those situations and could go wherever we wanted to in those situations. Well, in that regard, Dead Space Remake is much more in line with 2 and 3 in the series, and that is fantastic because it adds a huge layer to the zero gravity sections that just weren't there in the first game. And another thing that I want to add to the long list of pros for this game is that the fact that it's on new consoles enables there to be absolutely no load times. You start the game up, you hit continue, and you're in the game. There's no load times between areas or anything like that. The game is completely seamless, all done in one shot, and it's done really, really well. Now, I think the coolest thing of all the things that they've added to this remake is something that I didn't even know about on my first time playing through. I actually only read about it after I beat the game the first time, and that's the fact that there's a new thing called the Intensity Director. Now, long story short on what this is, and it's pretty damn awesome, is that it's something that reads the way you play the game. It reads how well you're faring in the game, and it gives you more or less enemies based on how well you're doing in that situation. Let's say that you're doing really well with these enemy encounters on your playthrough, well then it might actually trigger other encounters, or it might actually trigger more enemies for your encounters based on how you're playing. I noticed on my normal playthrough the first time, I was running into a lot more enemies, or at least that's what it felt like. And this actually makes it make sense, because on my hard playthrough, I'm not running into as many enemies, but the combat situations are far more intense. It sees how well or not well in some cases I'm handling these intense situations and alters the gameplay based on that, and that is really awesome, and I can't believe I didn't hear about this before the game launched. Now on to the list of cons, and I don't really have a list of cons for this game. I have a con in particular, one negative thing to say about this. And it's something that I probably wouldn't have had a problem with had I not played Last of Us Remake. In fact, I think it's the only thing that Last of Us Remake does better than this remake. And what I'm talking about is a difficulty editor, not a difficulty selector. This game has a difficulty selector. I'm talking about a difficulty editor. Let's say I'm playing Last of Us Part 1 and I want the enemies to be very, very difficult. I can go to my difficulty editor, put my enemies on grounded. That's the hardest difficulty in the game. And let's say I want to take more damage, a little more damage than normal. Well, then I can go to my player and put it on hard, or maybe I put it on survivor, or maybe I just go all the way up to grounded as well on that. But maybe I want it to be easy, maybe I want it to be super easy. I can put it very light. This is awesome. And there's also ways you can edit the stealth in the game. You can make it easier to be detected, harder to be detected, and there's also a way to edit the amount of resources and ammo you get. On my playthrough that I'm currently doing on Last of Us Part 1, again, I'm playing a New Game Plus. On that playthrough, I have resources set to very light, which means I'll get tons of ammo, tons of resources, tons of health, and then the enemies are set to grounded. That means the enemies are going to be very difficult. I have my players set to hard. That means I'm going to take a little bit more damage than normal, but it's going to be pretty manageable. It just really would have been awesome to see Dead Space Remake implement something along those lines. But really, outside of that, I don't have many complaints about this game, if any at all. I mean, I think EA Motive made just about as perfect of a remake as they could possibly make, and it's something that Dead Space fans really, really needed. There wasn't much to be excited about if you're a Dead Space fan outside of this remake, and they absolutely nailed the remake. And with this remake performing so well on all these platforms, Steam, PlayStation, Xbox, I think it begs the question, will we see a remake to Dead Space 2? Now, for me personally, I would love that. I'm really hoping that is the case. I'm hoping it's the case that we see a remake for Dead Space 2 and 3, and really for 3. I mean a full remake for 3, a complete reimagining of what that story, what that gameplay is in 3. And hey, who knows, maybe after that we continue the story of Dead Space. Maybe we're on to Dead Space 4. Maybe we get an entirely new reboot of Dead Space. I mean, both of those things would be fantastic. It would be nice to have Dead Space back in some form or capacity, releasing new story content. But really, I want to hear from you guys. What did you guys think about the Dead Space remake? Have you played it? Are you on the fence? Leave a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on all of it. Leave a like if you liked the video. And if you're enjoying this kind of content, want to stay up to date with it going forward over here on the channel, the best way to do that is consider subscribing, consider ringing the notification bell, because that's the best way to stay up to date with everything that happens over here on the channel, and it's a great way to help support the channel. And with that being said, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.